reflect. That being here with you right now makes me reflect on how I got here and where we are. And I thought of another Max who took a totally different course than me, but who also grew up sort of in the mainstream of Jewish American life. His name was Max Steinberg. He was 24 years old, and he was killed in combat in the Gaza Strip with the Golani Brigade. With an elite unit in the Golani Brigade, he was invading the Gaza Strip in Shujaiya, an area that was completely destroyed. He was essentially terrorizing occupied Palestinians. Max Steinberg grew up in a major metropolitan area like I did. I grew up in D.C. He grew up in Los Angeles, and he was radicalized in a synagogue in Woodland Hills and radicalized through various pro-Israel programs. He signed up as a young man to become a foreign fighter, a Jewish jihadist, if you will, for the state of Israel, to join a foreign army that maintains a brutal occupation. John Kerry, and it's tragic, John Kerry, the Secretary of State, appeared at the funeral of Max Steinberg, the foreign fighter, and said that he stands in awe of this young man who went to fight for a foreign army. This young man who went to fight for the Jewish state in Israel and the Levant, or JSIL, while John Kerry calls for war on the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, a force that is largely comprised or partially comprised of young Muslim men who were radicalized in the West and enlisted as foreign fighters to commit acts of ethnic cleansing. I grew up in D.C., and as I went to Hebrew school and grew up, there were attempts to radicalize me, to make me a supporter of JSIL, the Jewish state. If you grow up as a Jewish American in middle-class life in the United States, Zionism calls on you, and you have to decide. And it was when I was 22 and I had just gotten out of college that I finally decided to take one of these free trips to Israel, the Birthright Israel trip, where young American Jews are radicalized and recruited for the Jewish state. It didn't work out for me the way they wanted. Now, the funders of Birthright Israel, like Sheldon Adelson, who also happens to be one of the largest funders of the Republican Party and of Benjamin Netanyahu, say that they aim to accomplish two things. Number one, they want to prevent assimilation, in other words, intermarriage. So it's the ultimate Jewish sex vacation. I didn't participate in that aspect at the time. Maybe I have some regrets, I don't know. But the second aspect is to build a lifelong connection between you and Israel. And in that sense, it did work on me. The problem is, it didn't work the way they wanted. It planted the seeds of doubt in my mind. I knew something was being hidden from me. And when I returned to my everyday life in Los Angeles, I started following the Israel-Palestine crisis. It's not a conflict. If anything, it's a conquest. I started following it more closely than ever. The Second Intifada had just begun. And I watched as the Israeli Air Force dropped a 2,000-pound bomb on an apartment block in Gaza City in order to kill one Hamas operative, Salah Shahada, knowing that his entire family and 13 other families were inside. Scores were injured, children and women were killed, and the head of the Israeli Air Force shrugged his shoulders and said, yeah, we did it. What are you going to do? Jenin happened. The Jenin refugee camp was destroyed, and I watched with horror as the center of the camp was literally bulldozed. And I started going out to forums at synagogues held by supposedly liberal groups like Americans for Peace Now. And I noticed that the liberal Zionists had joined ranks with the right-wing Zionists. And the only debate was what size cage Palestinians should live in, a regular or jumbo-size cage. I noticed there was no real debate. And I wondered, where were the moderate Jews to condemn this radicalism? Where were the moderate Jews to condemn the violence of the state of Israel? I couldn't find them in my community. And so I felt alone. And I embarked on a long process of trying to figure out where I fit in and how I could approach this issue in good conscience as a humane person who'd been raised as a liberal by a family that told me to respect equality and these basic issues of fairness. How could I be a Jew and be a Zionist and still be a humane person?
Max, if you could talk about how you chose the title of your book, Goliath.
I originally wanted to call it Master Race Democracy, but I thought it would have to be sold in a brown paper bag, like the album with John and Yoko nude on the cover. So I was convinced against that. Then I wanted to call it Masada, which is the second century AD Roman era fortress where Jewish fanatics holed up after slaughtering Jewish moderates at Ein Gedi who wanted to negotiate with the Roman Empire after they rebelled against the Roman Empire and then committed mass suicide rather than surrender. And Masada has kind of become a source of inspiration for people in the right wing in Israel, including Benjamin Netanyahu, who sees the leadership at Masada as kind of as role models, and he's spoken of them as role models. The Israeli political psychologist Daniel Bartal, who has helped pioneer the field of trauma studies and done enormous work on understanding the attitudes of Jewish Israeli society, conceived the term Masada syndrome to explain the syndrome that many in Israeli society had fallen under. So I thought it was an appropriate title, but my editors in Nation Books thought Goliath would be better. It plays to a more familiar biblical tale of David and Goliath, and traditionally Israel, the state of Israel, sought to portray itself as a David surrounded by the Arab Goliath, and the title flips the script. Israel's the Goliath with the most powerful military in the Middle East with a special relationship with the U.S., and so we went with it. And it worked. The only unfortunate thing was Malcolm Gladwell had this book come out at the same time, David and Goliath. And there's one line in the book where he says, he writes, Israel is a David. And he doesn't explain why and just moves on. So my book's the counterpoint.
We had J.J. Goldberg on Democracy Now! Debating Ali Abunim of Electronic Intifada. J.J. Goldberg is with The Forward in July. This was a few weeks into the Israeli assault. Ali asked him if he'd been to Gaza, and J.J. responded, "No, I would be shot if I went to Gaza."
Right.
You're an American Jew, an American Jewish reporter in Gaza. Talk about your experience there. You actually tweeted about what J.J. Goldberg said.
I did, but I actually don't know if J.J. Goldberg is an Israeli citizen, in which case he would not be allowed to enter Gaza. He is a former sniper for the Israeli border police. So another foreign fighter for JSIL, who's now part of the American mainstream media. I found you have to watch this debate. This is one of the most incredible moments of political theater that I've seen in a long time. It's a total smackdown. And J.J. Goldberg, I found it really satisfying because J.J. had attacked my book. I thought he smeared me, and he sort of fabricated quotes by me, or doctored quotes that I delivered at a talk at the University of Pennsylvania to suggest that I was calling for the expulsion of all Israeli Jews. I was satisfied to see the smackdown, but as far as his suggestion that if Jews go to Gaza, they will be shot on sight, I can